Before we come to the panel questions, I'd like to ask our panel members to do a quick self-introduction as well, because we have an official introduction, but really I want to learn a little bit about yourself. Uh, since Chris already started, let's give a chance to Pushpender first. Pushpender, can you talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. And and I'd like to thank everyone for giving this opportunity for me as well to speak on this panel. So I'm part of Accenture. I have about 16 plus years of experience in infrastructure and security. I have done a lot of SOC work, like SIM deployment. I mean, I have extensively worked with Sentinel for past 3 years, but before that, I have worked with other SIM tools like Splunk, ArcSight as well, right? And outside that, I have been, like I have done a lot of infosec work before, right? So I have experience in a lot of tools there. In Accenture, we generally follow, like my focus generally is on, like cyber defense, Sentinel, uh, related work, and we do a lot of other cloud security work as well, right? So for example, doing some cloud strategy, cloud, roadmaps, and then taking those implementation deployment projects. Yep. I'm based out in Calgary, in Canada.
All right. Hopefully, is that hot there today?
Yeah, it's very hot.
Okay. Yeah,
Unusually hot.
28 here. Chris, you from Vancouver, right?
Yeah, I'm actually on Vancouver Island now, but yeah, it's hot over here as well.
All right. Chris, you want also thank you, Pushpender.
Yeah.
Chris, you also want to give maybe
For
30
sure, yeah,
seconds to talk
yeah.
about
I'm
yourself.
Chris. I'm a security specialist at Microsoft. So over the last, I would say, 5, 6 years, I'm focused really exclusively around anything within our Defender space. My history really comes from System Center, a lot of config man, and mostly what we call Service Manager. A lot of people don't know, but we have our own ITSM tool inside of Microsoft, and ITSM and automation goes hand in hand. So I have such a huge background in what we call System Center Orchestrator and PowerShell, and I was able to basically take my massive background in automation with an ITSM background and sort of adapt that to logic apps and Sentinel and SOAR. And it was very kind of easy to pivot from those different natures because, once you kind of have the idea of, I want to automate something and what's the process around that and taking a vision of something you want to automate and bringing it to life. That's one of my favorite things. And it's just such a passion of mine that I can bring a lot of these cool automation ideas to Sentinel. And as I said, it's such an artistic flair within the IT community as opposed to reading documentation and best standard practice around architecture. I can really bring ideas to life through SOAR, and I absolutely love that piece.
Excellent. And through Chris' presentation, you can see those tools like a kind of they're puzzles and those
Yeah.
are Legos, right? So you can make them wire things together.
Yeah.
All right. But before we talk about some detailed technologies or the tools, let's get a little bit about the big picture. Why is SOAR so important to us today? Because we had a lot of technologies, tools, like in the cybersecurity industry. Why SOAR nowadays become a kind of a center of the topics? So maybe Pushpanda can start because yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think like that. So there is not one thing which would have contributed to this, right? Like there are so many things in past what you say like 2 decades, we have advanced a lot in terms of technology, and I would say like cloud was a major contributor there. So like you can do so many tasks today remotely through APIs, what you could have done like even 5 years ago, right? And it makes sense to take advantage of that, right? So you can automate so many things today, and like there are so many SOCs out there which are still functioning in a conventional traditional way. So if you can automate something, you should do that. So that is like one of the I would say major factor which has made SOAR so important today, right? So if you remember, like if people who have been in IT for quite some time, they would know like a decade ago how difficult it was to make two systems talk, right? Because like the vendors were different, technologies were different. Sometimes they don't even support same protocol, right? With the advance of cloud, everything is online. You have to do everything through code, right? Even the deployments, patching, like the usual IT task, everything is kind of automated, like can be done through a code, right? So anything which can be done in code can also be automated. So I think that is a like one of the major change which has changed the technology landscape so much, where SOAR seems the logical next step.
Yeah, I mean, you totally hit the nail on the head. I mean, to me, I think security teams are just overworked. There's a massive job shortage in cybersecurity. We know this. This is no surprise to anybody. And the idea of security teams being overworked, underpaid, overwhelmed, the idea is we want to equip them with the information that they need to make decisions faster. Give them repeatable actions that are less error prone, empower them so when they're in these stressful situations, they have the information that they need to very quickly make the decisions that could be the matter of a breach or not a breach. And if they're not equipped with this information, they get stressed out, they get overworked, they don't feel like they're making a difference within the SOC. And that is where ultimately you have high turnover. So empowering your SOC team with the information they need to make decisions quicker, I think is one of the critical pieces of information around why SOAR is so critical and important, around today's landscape.
Excellent. So that's a reason why we need the SOAR. And Chris, you mentioned some challenges in Security Operations Center already.
Yeah.
So I want to dive that a little bit further. So what are, of course, like a talent shortage, like fatigue, burnout, those are common things in the Security Operations Center. So, but I want to give a little bit more details about some common challenges in today's Security Operations Center. Also considering, because there, Pushpender mentioned that there are all kind of emergent technologies coming out, like a cloud, multi-cloud, like all kind of environments. So what do you see some common challenges in today's SOC?
Yeah, I think too many tools, far too many tools in most environments. The sheer quantity of tools that a SOC has to deal with on a day-to-day basis makes it an extremely stressful job. The way these tools are disconnected, they're not sharing information, they're not really telling the whole picture. It leaves it up to the analyst to try to make sense out of a very complex decision. So I personally think there's far too many tools out there. Rationalizing what security tools you have, focusing on the tools that make the most difference, getting those tools integrated are critical pieces of information. I also think that there's a lack of experience around SOAR with a lot of SOCs. Very seldom do I go into a security operations and ask them kind of, what's your SOAR like? And the answer is almost resoundingly, we're working on it. We're planning on it. We bought it, but we haven't used it. These are common things that I hear over and over and over again. And the moral of the story here is get familiar with APIs, right? We'll talk about this a little in the future panel discussions, but get more experience with SOAR platforms that are out there. Start playing with logic apps. Start using things that have GitHub. There's so much great material that is already out there, as I've shown you with the stat modules, our playbook template library. Get out there, start using this stuff. It's really, really easy to make use of other people's, playbooks that are currently out there. You don't have to constantly reinvent the wheel or think you need a team of programmers to start doing this stuff within Sentinel.
Excellent. Pushpender, you want to add on that one? Some
Right.
challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris has really covered most of the the biggest rocks there, biggest challenges when it comes to SOC, right? And then I think like the turnover, right? That is a very like that to me, that is a huge factor, right? So like every domain, every stream of work has some sort of a learning curve, right? And most of the SOCs you would see, like they are structured in a tiered manner, right? Where you'll have a tier one layer, which will have like mostly like, like fresh out of colleges or junior people, right? And then like it takes time to learn things, and by the time these guys are ready for like really understand the profession, really understand the like what they should be doing, uh, they are moving like for something else, because technology is uh, changing a lot, right? So you have such a big turnover at this layer, that standardize becomes difficult, right? Like you have ton of incidents coming in daily, and these guys have to check so many things manually. It becomes difficult to standardize your response or tries there, right? That means your tier 2, tier 3 resources, they gets burdened, right? Because now they are dealing with a lot of like unqualified incidents, right? So and then that effect gets like you get that ripple effect there. So if you can leverage SOAR to standardize most of your redundant tasks at the tier 1, like not only it will help your tier 1 analyst a lot, it will help your the whole chain, right? So that is how like you can leverage SOAR there to understand what are your and what is and the day-to-day task which you have to do like over and over again. Those are the like first thing to target, right? And that's what reduces the morale of your team as well, right? So if as an analyst I'm dealing with like 15-20 incidents per hour, and most of the time I have to just email few like email few details to few people, that is something which can be automated very easily, right? And that free up so much time for your analyst to learn and to do so much other tasks which really require some brain power.
That's so true.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's basically the challenges, some common challenges at the SOC, and why that also caused the like a turnover and also shortage, burnout. And so automation, actually the center of those is automation, how to wire things together, automate the process, really is part of the key answers to address those challenges. All right. So since we set up this kind of the reasons, the challenges, now let's look at that. Okay, we want to implement some SOAR capability or tools. What do you see? What do you say? There are some like, how do we do it? How do we start? And what kind of a blocks you can foresee along the road? And also, what kind of a best practice or the tips you can share when we implement a SOAR at the data operation center?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, as I said earlier, start small. Don't focus on things that have a large productivity impact. Implementing playbooks that disable user accounts or isolate computers. These are things that could have a severe impact to productivity and end user. And as soon as you implement these things and you interrupt the business, that SOAR program is going to get put on hold. So get your feet wet with the things that make the biggest difference. Analysts are spending most of their time in triage. Look at helping triage data, enrich those incidents in the entities, get more and more data. Make sure your XDR and SIEM are integrated as tightly as possible so you can take most advantage of SOAR. If you don't have your incidents, you don't have your entities, you can't really get started on SOAR. So we make it nice and simple with Sentinel and Logic apps. I've said utilize core API calls whenever possible. If you want to do something simple, find the API, find the documentation, leverage the APIs whenever possible directly, as opposed to kind of using some of the easy out of the box connectors, because those can potentially run into problems in the future. One thing you'll think of as you start implementing SOAR and playbooks is, you're going to need what we call service principals or things that have permissions to do things. I need an account, and that account has to have permission to delete email from anybody's mailbox. These become very sensitive, incredibly sensitive system and service accounts. And in the past, in a lot of attack scenarios, we've seen attackers abuse these. We've seen in the case of SolarWinds where those attackers would get in people's environments, figure out what service principals are out there, and start abusing them. So get a handle over what we call your managed identities and your service principals, and do least privilege. Don't give a service principal more permissions than it needs. Start using, there's lots of toolkits out there that can evaluate and analyze over permission service principals. Start monitoring the certificates and secrets and keys related to these service principals, because if they get out and an attacker gets access to a principal that can read everybody's email, that is a bad day in anybody's organization. So get a handle over these keys. Make sure you're not using usernames and passwords to automate things. Use certificates, use secrets, get a handle over them, and build off the success of others. Everything I showed today is on GitHub for you to use. You can repurpose a lot of these modules. You can reinsert your own modules. You can help contribute to existing GitHub projects. Don't think that you have to start from the ground up, right? Start reusing existing content that's out there. Those are all really, really good best practices around implementing SOAR.
Those are really valuable input, and those are some like a point out. I like what you mentioned, like start small, right? So
Yeah.
don't try to overnight to resolve all those challenges, which is not realistic, but also cause a lot of potential troubles. But really get good at certain things at the beginning, then get more familiar with the tools and also using mature way of doing things rather than, okay, those are like convenient, but may not be sustainable for a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
And Pushpender, from your point of view, what kind of best practice you can share?
Right. I mean, I would like to reiterate what Chris mentioned, right? So these are really good points, and these are like, should be your focus, right? And then what we generally do at Accenture for the clients, so we actually spend some time to build that framework, right? Because like, see, when you start developing these SOAR playbooks, right? So these like very soon you will find you have so many playbooks, it becomes really hard to understand and manage like which playbooks are for what, right? How many playbooks are getting used. So if putting a framework around this whole SOAR playbook development is really, that goes a long way, right? It helps you understand how you are going to acquire those credentials, how are you going to manage those credentials, right? So if you have to rotate your passwords, how those process will look like, right? And the impact, right? Like where your SOAR playbooks are going to make an impact, right? So generally, like what we have seen in our experience is like people get really excited with the SOAR and they want to solve big problems, right? With SOAR, but SOAR is not to solve big problems. You have your analyst to do that, So the job of SOAR is to free up your analyst, right? Not to solve these big problems, right? And how you do that? Take the boring task, take the mundane task, things which are simple, but you are spending a lot of time there, right? So like pick up those tasks, and those are the best cases for SOAR, right? And then when it comes to response, right? For response, you have to, like most of the times you have to make changes, you have to make some impact, right? Outside SOC, right? You understand your SOC very well. You understand how your security organization or security function work, right? But most of the incidents, they come outside SOC, right? Like your actual users who may not be that tech savvy or may not be like very tech savvy in terms of like the technology you use, right? For example, your field engineers, right? Or normal users, right? And when you start making those changes, it impact how they operate, right? It impacts the business. So that is something which you have to keep at the like end, because like before making all these changes, you really understand your your value chain, your business processes, your communication lines. You have to like really understand with that, and then you have to have that trust established with outside security organization, right? So that now we are at that point. I would like to make this really important uh, uh, point, right? Like no organization, however big it is, has infinite budget for security, right? So you will always be working with a small team. You would always be looking for more people, right? So in that case, the rest of the organization becomes your the ambassadors, or like your extended team. So you really have to work with the rest of the organization to keep the organization secure, right? And that trust goes a long way, right? If your people trust that your security team will not like change their passwords without letting them know, and then you are spending like 2 hours with the support desk just to figure out like your password got changed and you have to reset, and then like, so it makes their life easy difficult, and then they make your life difficult afterwards. So you have to be sure about those decisions, and you have to really focus on like what SOAR use cases you want to pick up first, right?
Excellent.
Yeah, and those frameworks and understanding all these dynamics really help you.
Excellent. I like what you mentioned, the framework, the structured way, like a project management, right? The structured way to implement So although there's a very powerful tool like a SOAR, like a playbooks, but you also want to put some standards, right? So to when you implement that, follow certain process or structure to do it rather than randomly pick, okay, I like this, I like this, I like that, and I put in there. But really is to kind of like a standardize a little bit about the process.
Right.
Another great point I like is you need to collaborate with other users. It's not like only cybersecurity people are like doing everything. In fact, if other people take their share, that will actually also reduce the workload on cybersecurity people, like security operation centers people. Not just, okay, I do most efficient way of inside the security center only, then that can solve the things. But in fact, there's more people outside your security operation center. You need to make them more efficient or like a collaborate as well. So I like those two great points. All right. SOAR, some people have a question about SOAR really is because right now corporate environment become more and more complex, especially for large organizations. It's not just like old days, like everything on premise behind the firewall. Right now, a large organization usually have a multi-clouds, Microsoft Azure, like a AWS, or like a GCP, or different cloud environments. They may also have a public cloud, private cloud, or like a community cloud, all those like a hybrid cloud environments, plus the on-premise situation. And when you also consider, okay, global like environments, it's not just in one jurisdiction. So considering those are very complex hybrid environments, how does a SOAR work on this environment? How SOAR can help?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I wish everybody was just in Microsoft, and that isn't exactly the case, right? We've got lots of customers in AWS and GCP, so hybrid cloud is real. I mean, there's on-prem, but as Pushpender hit on earlier, around, in the past, a lot of these systems weren't able to communicate effectively. They run in different protocols. There was different languages. Some might use Python, some might use PowerShell, and there's many different ways to automate. Nowadays, APIs are everywhere. I mean, any cloud provider, whether it's GCP or AWS or Microsoft, there's APIs that exist to automate anything throughout the environment. So the key here is, understand what those APIs are, understand what you want to automate, get familiar with those APIs and those documentation across those disparate systems. And the other thing to take note is get a unified, what we call cloud workload protection or cloud security posture management system. So get all your entities in your SIEM, right? So whether that resource exists in AWS, in GCP, in Azure, on-prem, get them all correlated, integrated, and centrally within your SOAR platform so you can start executing SOAR against them. And one of the great ways to do this is our Defender for Cloud feature, which now natively supports AWS and GCP. You can actually put in connectors that will pull in every object from AWS and GCP. So when an AWS S3 bucket has an incident, we can actually see that incident in Sentinel. We can execute SOAR operations against those different entities across those hybrid environments. So centralize and get your disparate cloud environments into your SIEM so you can natively execute SOAR and get familiar with all the different APIs that exist for those disparate clouds. There's lots of built-in connectors and logic apps to do stuff against AWS and GCP already. There's never going to be an entire set of APIs out of the box. So start investigating what APIs exist. That's the first thing I think about when I want to automate something in a disparate system is where's the APIs? Where's the documentation? What actions can I do against those APIs? So APIs, I can't stress enough about that.
Yeah, integration is very important.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it sounds like, to me, it's like a big data kind of things, right? So you need to have all the data available for you to further analyze, automate. If you miss critical data, so you miss the whole information. So from input point of view, you need to pay attention already there. Pushpender, what do you suggest?
Right. I mean, your environment plays a big role, right? So like entire premise of SOAR, it depends on the integration, right? So if your SOAR system, whatever you choose to use cannot interact with the target system, then that's a big problem, right? So cloud, so mostly like there won't be much problems in cloud in that aspect, right? So because cloud is supposed to be code, right, across the board. So you would find it like for cloud, the adoption of SOAR would be like much faster. The penetration would be much bigger, right? But when it comes to the legacy world, right? I mean, cloud is a big thing, but still a lot of world is still operating, out of, like mainframe is still not outdated. I mean, like mainframe is outdated, but it's still there in a lot of organizations. So there will be buckets where, you won't find SOAR to be that helpful, right? But that doesn't undermine like how capable SOAR is, right? Because you still have a lot of presence in cloud, right? And biggest challenge what we see in cloud out there is lack of governance, right? Because it's so easy to set up an environment out there. Most organizations are struggling to understand their cloud footprint, right? So SOAR can really help them, it very quickly you can take actions there when it comes to that, right? But as we have the discussion before so far, so the biggest impact you would see from SOAR is increasing your SOC efficiency, right? And most of the SOC tool you are going to use today will be state of the art in most cases, right? You will have a lot of APIs, you will have a lot of data, you have a lot of tools, right? In fact, the problem you have today at SOC is the uh, the abundance of tools, right? That is the biggest problem we are facing. It's not lack of the tools, but the abundance of the tools. So how you are going to
Too
manage all
many
those
tools.
tools, right? And then like if you have to like onboard a new analyst today, right? He has to learn so many tools, right? So SOAR is going to help you out in standardizing that process, because now he just have to understand like what different playbooks do. He like you can abstract that layer, like how these playbooks do that, right? So that is the value you are going to get out of the SOAR, right? And then as we mentioned earlier, right, that framework that is going to help you out a lot, because like the number of APIs you're going to deal with, like you linearly your number of credentials will increase, right? And then what accounts you are going to use. So you obviously don't want to use like one global administrator level account for your all of your playbooks, right? So you really want to structure how you want to you know manage that access. And identity and associated permissions to those identities will play a central role when it comes to cloud, right? Because that is your first layer of defense. So really need to think about those aspects. When it comes to the hybrid environments, there would be other factors to consider as well, because you also need to think about access. You also need to think about connectivity, right? Because how your environment, like if your SOAR tool is cloud based, SaaS or Sentinel, then it has to come back into your environment and connect with whatever that is, right? That means your on-premise environment has to be open for some sort of public access, right? So unless you have a secure way of connecting that, then that could open up, more security issues. So you need to think about this all these aspects as well. So there will be pockets in your environment where SOAR contributes a lot, and there will be there are pockets where SOAR may not be, like that impactful. So you need to be mindful of all these aspects when you know did when you assess the ROI, right? And then yeah, so yep, so that's where I would rest it. So I think like so many factors to consider, but that doesn't undermine what SOAR can do.
Right. I get an impression because nowadays we have so many powerful tools, right? So the biggest challenge is not we lack of tools, really is how to better use those tools, understand tools first, right? So, but there are so many that's already a challenge. But then even you know how to use that, what's the best way to not only use this tool, but also how to use combine other tools together to form a standard way. Because at the end of the day, it's not just one person's job, right? It's a team. You need to kind of put in a structured way, standard way. And so you need people like Pushpender and Chris the experienced people kind of like coach you and also to give you some insights and point out some roadblocks. So you don't really need to go through all those mistakes. And then I learned a big lesson. So that's a reason for professional services that's important as well. So not just, okay, I buy a tool, that's it. But really, as you need to also have a experienced people to help you to better use those tools and point out how to putting things together. All right, so actually we touched on a little bit on the next questions already. So for people, that we always know there's a talent shortage in cybersecurity, but also means because the technology is changing so fast, so many tools, just like a SOAR, back to a couple of years ago, they're probably not even a concept, right? So right now become a topic, like a zero trust back to several years ago. Not many people know that, but right now almost every company using zero trust as their like a standard or the model. So because it's changed so fast, and also the new way of doing things coming out almost like every day. Just look at Azure, how many new services coming out, how many new terms coming out. So for people working in cybersecurity team, especially for SOC, right? So what do you see are some key skills and capabilities you want to develop, right? So if you both of you, like say you are the hiring manager, so what kind of people you are looking for? How do you help them to grow as a career?
Yeah, I mean, I laugh at the quote from Don Jones, MVP, around, as a Microsoft admin, you should learn PowerShell or learn would you like fries with that? And I kind of challenge that nomenclature as say, learn APIs or learn would you like fries with that? Because nowadays, with the advent of cloud, APIs are everywhere. So I mean, my background is in ITSM and automation and PowerShell and Orchestrator. I didn't know anything about APIs. It's only in the last 3-4 years that the advent of APIs being everywhere, I've really had to upskill around how to call an API, how to take that data, how to parse that data to get what I need, how to feed that data to another step to do what I want to do. So working with APIs, learning things like Postman and being able to interact with APIs and understand API documentation is so critical in having a successful SOAR platform. I think the other thing is very creative thinkers, people who are very creative in the IT field that like to think of very creative solutions are really advantageous to the SOC. People who are beyond just kind of following directions in architecture. We need creative thinkers in this space. We need ways to creatively gather data and pass solutions on from one problem to the other. So I think creative thinkers, learning APIs are two of the kind of core skill sets that I think are really required to have successful SOAR programs.
Wonderful. All right. So that's actually very interesting because oftentimes we say, okay, people, okay, you need to do this, do that, follow the things. But this is a unique angle you're putting there, Chris. You're from the creative people, to how to kind of revamp the current way of doing things, and also putting something even people may not think about before, but actually that's maybe the better way to do it. All right, Pushpender, what do you see there?
Right. To totally agree there, Brian, with Chris. I mean, he really hit the nail on the head, right? So this the like most of your time in SOAR will go in development of playbooks and management of them, right? Like you'll have a playbook life cycle and managing that life cycle. That's where your most of your time will go, right? So obviously, like whatever SOAR platform you are using, that will be the primary requirement of your skill set, right? But you would like to hire people who are like more who are like very curious, who doesn't shy away from the research, because every playbook will have its own challenges, right? You're dealing with a new platform, you're dealing with a new API, right? So you really need to understand. So having some sort of development background really helps in this uh, domain. But you also need to understand, some for example, in infrastructure, right? So how your playbook is going to deal with like what that connectivity looks like, right? So those kind of things, right? So and as you grow in that area, obviously you will get to know more. But I would say like it's very hard for like there is no one major skill, right? It really depends on who you are, and if you have a development background, that is going to help a lot, right? So scripting, coding, because you will find situations where you just don't have a connector, right? Or the logic app or like whatever the capability SOAR platform has may not be the best way to do it, right? And you can do things more efficiently by a couple of lines in a script. So those type of things, you need to take those decisions, and you can do that if you have that curiosity and that research mindset.
Excellent. Oftentimes I found that people are like kind of like ready for cybersecurity jobs. They need to have something like a curiosity. They want to learn more, right? So they want to dive into that, okay, figure it out, and don't give up so quickly. Or if someone just okay encounter, of course we will encounter all kind of challenges. Maybe there's a lack of API, or maybe the API missing some functions. But if you just quickly give up, okay, that's it, it doesn't work. But if you take time to learn a little bit more and further dive into that, oftentimes you will find interesting solutions. And I think Chris also mentioned that we need solutions, not tools to the problem, right? So because to form a solution, tool is just one piece of it, right? So you need also how to use the tool, how to the process, and how to integrate with the people and the other components. So eventually form a solution rather than just, okay, I have a tool, that no problem. So that's actually a great input there. All right. In fact, we kind of like getting closer to the end of our panel discussion. We walked through quite many questions already, like why we need a SOAR and what kind of common challenges in the SOAR, and I mean also how to implement the SOC, and also what kind of challenges and skills and capabilities we require to implementing SOAR. And so before we wrap up the panel discussion, if you can only give one top suggestion or advice to our audience, right? So although there are so many, but if you can only give one, what do you want to suggest? And what's your top tip for the security orchestration, automation, and response?
For me, I mean, if it had to be one, I would say learn your tools. Every security team has tools. Every tool has a strength and weakness. We can't automate what we don't know about. So the idea is let's integrate before automate. Let's figure out what our tools are capable of. I see far too many organizations trying to automate things that their tools already do. So get familiar with your tools, know where your gaps are before you start jumping into executing SOAR operations within your environment.
Right. Yeah, so like also Pushpender point out, there are a lot of documents.
Yeah.
You need to read documents, right? Right. Rather than, okay, feels like I already understand, but really there's those details in the documents, right? So that's the first place to go.
Yeah, especially like yeah, I mean, I'll refer to that question before coming to the the recommendation. So in terms of like where we can find the API resources, right? So the most authentic resource you would find is the documentation which that particular product or the API owner maintains, right? So that is where you can find everything else. Like you won't, I even doubt if you find anything outside that, right? You can find some solutions or like how people have used that API here and there, but in terms of understanding like what that API is capable of, what commands it has, and all those things, you should refer to the product documentation there. Anyway, so coming to the recommendation, right? So like we have been pointing various things out throughout the discussions, right? But if it comes down to one thing, right? So I would suggest so the ROI, which we mentioned earlier, that would be my top recommendation. So really need to understand where you get the most value out of your SOAR use case, and that is going to that should drive your decisions, right? And then and you also need to understand that ROI. The ROI doesn't come from the incident response. The ROI comes from, as Chris explained earlier, from the triage, from the enrichment, right? So you really need to think about SOAR from the perspective that SOAR is going to take workload away from your analyst. It's so that is where this most value from SOAR comes in, right? So
Yeah.
that is where we also struggle with the like Accenture clients. So this is the understanding where like this is the most heated discussion we have our clients to make them realize like SOC is not some sort of James Bond, right? Which can like do things innovatively. So SOC is kind of your assembly line, right? It takes away the boring part out of your security operations and leave your analyst to do more. So that is where the SOC value comes from.
Yeah, I mean, we're never going to replace that human element, right? As Pushpender said, is definitely you're not going to automate your SOC out of a job. You're just going to automate the tasks that nobody wants to do. So you make them feel like they're making a difference, make them feel like they're contributing to the overall cybersecurity state, and they're not just grunts collecting information repetitively. Give them innovative ways to accomplish and solve problems as opposed to repetitive tasks. We're never going to automate them out of a job. Trust me. Attackers are always human. Defenders will always have to be human. I don't see perfect security as ever coming anytime soon.
Wonderful. All right, that's pretty much for today's panel discussion. I know there are quite many other things, like topics or the questions maybe outside this panel. I really encourage people online to connect with our panelists. They have done that. They have a first-hand experience, so really leverage their insights to help you in your business. And also, I think Chris already posted quite many resources there. And like Pushpender mentioned, the best way to read that is back to the source, right? So if you are on Microsoft Azure things, you need to looking at those documents, learning like a Learning Hub or like all those API overview, so that get the best understanding of that. Of course, cyber tech and risk, like many other organizations, we try to help doing our way to give you some insights and to find those speakers, the experts to come to share with you their insights. All right. So that's pretty much the end of our panel discussion and also our events. For Chris and Pushpender, I know one from Vancouver, one from Calgary. Your day pretty much not come to the evening yet, right? So for people, many people online right now, I think you're like me from Ontario, from Toronto. It's pretty much like a dinner time or after dinner time. So anyway, thank you very much. Take your precious time to join our virtual events. And thank you very much to our experts here. I'd like to ask everybody online to give a virtual applause to our panelists, and they come to share with us their valuable insights. And also give a pat to yourself, because hopefully you get some value from today's session. I'm sure you will learn a lot from further learning from the documents, and also we record the session. You can find some details.